Some absences don't feel accidental. I found out about the family meeting from Evelyn Grant, who still left her porch light on at dusk, like Grandma used to. She called to offer condolences, assuming I'd been there. "Helen always spoke so proudly of you," she murmured, then paused. "They're meeting Sunday, I suppose you're invited?" I wasn't. There was a group thread. We'd used it to plan holidays, exchange baby pictures, and forward articles no one read. I opened it again, thumb hovering above a message from Chloe about centerpieces. Meredith had replied with bullet points. Frank added a thumbs up. I scrolled back, searching for any mention of my name. Nothing. I typed, "Was there a meeting planned? Should I bring the old deed copy?" The typing bubble blinked for 2 seconds, then disappeared. No one answered. The next morning, I got the call while folding a towel that still smelled like Rachel's laundry soap. Meredith's voice had the clipped cadence she reserved for interns and waitstaff. "Sam, better you don't come. It's already handled." I asked what was handled. She exhaled, then, "These decisions require clarity. You complicate things." I didn't reply, not because I agreed, but because I couldn't remember the last time she called me by name without some warning buried inside it. That evening, I pulled up the file I'd saved 2 years ago. Grandma Helen's trust document, the digital scan she made me download to have just in case. Her initials were faint in the margins. I opened the new version from the county record. The paragraph that once held my name was gone. No strike-through. Just gone. Like I had never belonged there to begin with. The kettle clicked off behind me, but I didn't pour the tea. Instead, I sat at the edge of the couch, holding my old college hoodie in both hands. The hem was frayed one cuff, permanently stained with printer ink from the year I tutored night students. Grandma had patched the armpit once right after I'd defended my thesis. She brought it to the ceremony in a paper bag, said, "Some things deserve mending." No one had mentioned her funeral until Evelyn. In the thread, Chloe posted a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking beneath a banner "Dial-in Women Through the Years." I clicked on it, muted. Photo cutouts fluttered in the background. None of them had me in them. Even the one from my 16th birthday where I had stood in the middle with a sparkler in each hand had been replaced by Chloe posing beside the cake, her arm stretched into the space where I used to be. Rachel texted that night. Just one word. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to name the particular feeling that comes from watching your own presence edited out, while the world smiles around the gap. The next morning, I stared at the coffee ring on my desk, the faded brown circle from the cup Grandma used to leave beside the crossword puzzle. She never threw away the mugs with chips. "They still hold what matters," she'd say. Meredith left a voicemail later that day. "We've finalized the updates. Legal says it's best not to involve too many names. Simpler this way. Hope you understand." She didn't wait for a response. They never do when they know what they've done. I replayed the voicemail once, then deleted it. Later, while sorting through envelopes, I found one labeled Helen Whitlow, in trust for grandchildren. A note tucked inside dated 4 years ago, in Grandma's handwriting. Samantha holds the original. She has the most practical sense. That ink had bled slightly on the paper blue pen, her favorite held too long by fingers that trembled even when she wouldn't admit it. I folded the note in half, then again, slid it behind a photograph of us in her garden, the one where she wore a wide hat and I knelt beside her with muddy palms. In the background, the rose bush she swore wouldn't bloom. There had been no explosion, no argument, just a series of closed doors and messages never sent. The kind of erasure that doesn't require shouting, only sustained silence. I stared at the corner of the room where my suitcase leaned half-zipped, the same one I brought back after surgery. No one had offered to carry it upstairs then, either. The group thread buzzed once more. Chloe posted a poll. Pale pink or blush napkins? Meredith responded. Go blush. Pale pink washes out on camera. No mention of Grandma. No line about her favourite peonies. No nod to the woman who taught them how to sign their name with flourish. My phone lit up again. This time a new message. Rachel. I'm still here, you know. I didn't reply, but I stared at that line a long time. 3 words that held more weight than all the scripts Meredith rehearsed. I set the phone down beside the patchwork notebook I hadn't opened in months. On the back cover was a sticker Grandma gave me when I turned 12. It read, "If no one saves you a seat, pull up a chair anyway." I pressed my palm flat against it, not for comfort, just to feel something still rooted in paper. No one had shouted. No one had slammed a door, but I knew now with a quiet certainty that I had already been locked out. And some locks are quieter than others. Some roles aren't assigned. They're absorbed quietly like water into old wood. I once rescheduled a surgery to help my mother with her recovery after a minor stroke. The doctor hesitated, warned me not to delay more than a month. I nodded, signed the release anyway. Meredith had meetings, Chloe had fittings. You're flexible, my mother told me over the phone. The others have real obligations. I kept a printed calendar on my fridge, back then color-coded taped at the corners. That month, I erased a line that read, pre-op consult, and replaced it with Mom's BP checkup. Tuesday, 8:45. I used the same pen. At home, I stayed out of frame. I was always the one behind the camera. Make sure to get the wreath in the background, Meredith reminded me at Thanksgiving. Don't zoom in too close. Chloe's dress wrinkles easily. Once at a 4th of July barbecue, I asked if someone could take one with me in it. My father handed the phone back without looking. Next time, he muttered. There wasn't a next time. I stopped asking. When Chloe received her Civic Award, I posted a photo on my feed. Proud of my baby sister, always chasing the light. She didn't comment. Later, I heard her tell Meredith Sam makes everything sound like a high school speech. It's weird. I had memorized the pattern praise, pause, redirect. At family dinners, I brought wine they hadn't asked for. I chopped onions, cleared plates, laughed too long at jokes I didn't follow. When arguments started over catering choices, guest lists, seating charts, I folded napkins into triangles and pretended not to notice. I used to believe that usefulness bought belonging. That, if I carried enough chairs, drove enough errands, remembered everyone's coffee order, someone would one day look at me and say, "We couldn't do this without her. It never came." When Chloe announced her engagement, I texted her privately. "I'd love to help with the budget, maybe split some deposits." She replied 3 days later. "Thanks, but we've already locked everything in. Don't worry about it." No punctuation, no emoji, just space. Still, I bought her a gift. A quilted throw stitched in navy and blush. I'd started it before I even got the invitation, though. Now I'm not sure if I was ever meant to receive one. I wrapped it with silver ribbon, left it on the guest room bed the weekend I stayed over after my procedure. Chloe passed by the door once saw the box. "You know these fabrics don't match my color theme, right?" She didn't say thank you. When I helped my mother into the car after a physical therapy session, she winced as I adjusted the seatbelt. "You don't need to hover. I can manage." Her wrist was still bruised, but she shifted anyway. I stepped back, hands still half raised. You always act like things are worse than they are, she added without looking at me. That night, I made her soup and left it by the bedside with crackers and her evening pill. She didn't touch it. I threw it out the next morning quietly before Chloe came in with her juice cleanse brochures. There was a holiday, once I don't remember which, when Meredith handed out matching scarves, cream-coloured embroidered initials. M-E-C-E-D-E, even F-E for our father. I unfolded mine. It was blank. Must have been a mix-up at the monogram shop, Meredith said, barely glancing up. Or maybe we didn't know how to spell yours anymore. She laughed to herself. Chloe sipped from her mug. No one else reacted. I folded the scarf carefully, placed it back in the gift bag, and left it on the hall table. Even my silence had edges, but no one seemed to notice when it cut. Once after a Sunday brunch, Meredith pulled me aside while Chloe posed in front of the fireplace. Don't post any photos from today. Okay. Just let the official ones go up first. We're trying to keep the feed cohesive. I nodded. My phone stayed in my pocket the entire afternoon. That evening, the family thread buzzed with filtered pictures and heart emojis. None were mine. I didn't scroll far. I've often wondered whether absence can be taught, whether a person can be trained over time to subtract herself before being erased. It's a kind of discipline, I suppose. Knowing when not to take up space, when to clear your throat and hold the sound in. I learned to do that well. Not out of fear, not even out of love, but out of something quieter, an old instinct that says, if you behave gently enough, maybe they'll make room for you. They never did. And even if they had, I don't think it would have been my shape they were carving space for. Some omissions are so quiet they hum beneath everything else. The Christmas card arrived folded neatly, cream envelope with gold trim. I almost didn't open it. On the front, a cartoon of 3 cardinals in scarves perched on a pine branch. Inside it read, "Warm wishes from Meredith, Chloe, and family." No mention of my name, not even a comma left behind where I could imagine it might have been. I kept that card on the kitchen counter longer than I should have. Not because I liked it, just to prove I hadn't imagined it. A few months later, I called my mother to share news. My department had honored me with a quiet award, internal modest but real. I remember standing near the window phone, pressed to my ear, watching the steam rise from my tea. I told her, paused. Her voice came clear but distant. Chloe just got promoted too. Assistant director now? Isn't that something that was the end of it? No question. No congratulations. Only the shifting of spotlight again. I didn't argue. I just wrote the date in the back of my planner and underlined it once. That spring, I booked a table for 1. My birthday fell on a weekday, and I didn't want the awkwardness of waiting for replies that never came. I chose a small Italian place with dim lighting and cloth napkins folded like envelopes. Rachel showed up unprompted with a used book tied in ribbon. She stayed through dessert. The candle on my tart burned low before I blew it out. The next morning, Meredith texted, "Thought your birthday was next week. We'll do something when things calm down." Things didn't. At some point, I stopped checking the group albums, but Chloe posted one on her page family barbecue throwback style, and the curiosity got the better of me. I clicked through, slowly recognizing the backyard by the shape of the tree. In the original photo, I'd been kneeling near the grill with a cupcake in hand, frosting on my nose. In this version, Chloe stood in my spot, holding the same tray. The image had been cropped with precision, my arm gone only a blur of someone else's shoulder near the edge. I sent Meredith a message. Do you still have the original? I'd love a copy. She replied hours later. These are just to capture the vibe. Don't overthink it. That night I dug out a shoebox of bold photos from my closet. Most of them had curled edges, a few were stuck together from heat. In one, I sat on the floor beside Grandma Helen's armchair, a jigsaw puzzle spread across the rug. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder. I stared at that image a long time, trying to remember how it felt to be held in a way that didn't require performing. I used to wonder if I was too quiet, if they forgot me because I didn't interrupt often enough. At dinner tables, I waited for gaps in conversation that never came. Chloe laughed over me. Meredith corrected me mid-sentence. My father glanced at his phone. Once, during a wedding speech, Meredith raised a toast to the women who carry this family with grace. She lifted her glass toward Chloe. I lifted mine too, out of habit. My name never came up. Years ago, I wore a rust-colored blouse to a cousin's bridal shower. I remember liking how it caught the light, soft cotton stitched hem, slightly too long in the sleeves. Meredith looked me over once before saying, "You always wear things that don't flatter your figure." I didn't respond. I spent the rest of the afternoon holding my purse in front of me. That blouse still hangs in my closet. I haven't worn it since. Not every wound announces itself. Some just settle in and become part of the furniture. When Grandma died, Evelyn was the one to tell me. Not a call. A message. I checked the family thread for announcements. It had moved on napkin swatches, hotel blocks, Chloe's bachelorette weekend plans. No black ribbons, no words like loss or goodbye. I never got an obituary, only silence, like it had all resolved without my participation. I think about that sometimes when I open drawers and find objects I never showed anyone, her silver thimble, the old birthday cards with her looping handwriting, the tiny plastic container that once held mints, but now held straight pins. I remember her voice. I hear it less often now. The last thing she told me, "Don't worry about making them see you, just stay whole." I didn't know what she meant then. I think I'm starting to. When Meredith brought out the family slideshow during Thanksgiving last year, she passed the remote to Chloe. Each image flicked by like a closing door. Living rooms, vacations, Sunday dinners. I counted the frames, 46 in all. My face appeared once blurry in the background, partially blocked by a centerpiece. Meredith caught my eye and smiled. We tried to keep it cohesive this year. Less clutter. I nodded, folded my napkin in half, kept my hands in my lap. There's a kind of silence that isn't quiet. It moves like a draft through closed windows, unseen, but present. I've learned to recognize it. In phone calls that end too quickly, in compliments that fall just short of acknowledgement, in names left off of invitations and photo captions and monogrammed scarves. Some people vanish loudly with slammed doors and sharp exits. Others disappear gradually, edited out, frame by frame, until all that's left is the echo of where they used to stand. I think I've been echoing for years. Some things don't shatter. They just settle into your spine. I wasn't expecting much. Just a bed, a door that closed, enough silence to let the stitches do their work. The hospital instructions were clear: no lifting, no climbing stairs, no unnecessary stress. I folded them into thirds and placed them on the nightstand the night I arrived back at my mother's house. She never touched the paper. On the third morning, I woke to the sharp click of heels on hardwood. Meredith stood in the doorway holding a clipboard. Her blouse matched the folder. "You'll need to vacate the guest room by this afternoon." I propped myself up slowly, one arm bracing against the frame. "I've only been here 3 days." She stepped in, flipping a page. "The florist needs space to set up. Chloe's shower is Saturday. We're turning this room into the staging area." I didn't answer. There was a folded towel at the foot of the bed, still faintly damp from the shower I took the night before. I had left it there to dry. It looked suddenly out of place like a stain on polished wood. "There's room in the garage," she added. "We'll put down a cot. For now." My hand found the bottle of pills on the nightstand, not to take one, just to feel the weight of it. "I can't even lie flat yet." She sighed without looking up. "Don't make this dramatic, Sam. It's just temporary." Chloe appeared behind her, holding a bundle of fake peonies wrapped in gauze. "Can we move your meds and things before they set the lighting? Oh, and if you're still bleeding, maybe stay away from the display table. It's all ivory." I didn't speak. They didn't wait. Later, Meredith returned with a folded blanket and a small lamp. She set them on the floor of the garage beside a metal chair. "It's only one night," she said, not unkindly. "You'll adjust." I nodded once. That was enough to make her leave. The cot was actually a folding lawn chair with a flattened cushion on top. The lamp flickered when I plugged it in its bulb, pulsing like it wasn't sure whether to stay. I lay back slowly, pulling the blanket over my legs. The air smelled like rust and old paint. A spider moved along the corner of the ceiling unbothered. Beneath me, the cushion dipped in the middle, forcing my spine into a slight curve. I pressed one palm against the gauze at my side. Still warm, still damp. Around midnight, I woke to laughter through the walls. Someone clinked glass. Chloe's voice rose over the others. "It's going to be the most beautiful shower anyone's ever seen." I turned onto my side, careful not to twist. The movement pulled at the wound. A slow, quiet tear. I closed my eyes and counted backward from 20 until the burning dulled. I used to think survival was about endurance. Now, I think it's about knowing when to stop pretending it doesn't hurt. By morning, the air had turned cold. I sat up with effort, feet on concrete. My slippers were still by the door. I hadn't worn them in the house. That boundary had remained even when everything else blurred. I walked back inside, slowly, one hand against the wall for balance. No one was in the hallway. The room I had left now held a folding table, covered in tulle, and labelled mason jars. A chalkboard sign leaned against the wall, "Love grows here." In the kitchen, Chloe stood with her back to me, arranging pastries on a tiered tray. She didn't turn. "Try not to be in the background when the photographer arrives." I reached for a mug near the sink, but the cabinet door clicked shut before I could open it. Meredith stepped in beside her clipboard, tucked under one arm. "I know you think this is personal," she said without preamble. "But you have to understand we're building something here. This isn't about you." I kept both hands around the mug I never filled. There was a crack near the handle, faint but visible. Someone had tried to glue it once. "Don't take up space if you can't support the structure." Meredith added voice, soft and deliberate. I set the mug back down without a sound. That evening, I returned to the garage. The lamp still flickered. I didn't turn it on. Instead, I lay on my side, watching a line of light crawl under the door and stretch across the floor. I counted my breaths not to calm myself, but to remember. I could. Some fractures don't announce themselves. They widen, quietly, slowly, like a door left ajar in the wind. I once believed there was virtue in being small, in staying quiet enough not to disturb the center. I folded myself into corners, shrank my expectations, chose my words with care. I thought that would keep the peace, but it never kept me. And now, with the blanket pulled to my chin, and the taste of blood still faint at the back of my throat, I understood something I hadn't before. Peace that requires erasure is not peace. It's disappearance. Some silences don't echo, they settle like dust you stopped trying to wipe away. I sat up slowly, the edge of the blanket brushing against a raw patch of gauze at my side. The thread on the hem had come undone, curling into a question mark. A mark of use, of having lasted long enough to fray. The same blanket I'd taken from the linen closet 3 nights earlier, before they told me I didn't belong in the room upstairs. My legs swung off the metal chair they called a fold-out cot. It was more steel than cushion. The cold had crept in overnight, and even now I could feel it coiled in my joints. There was a smear of dried blood on my old sweatshirt just below the collar. Not fresh. Not alarming. Just stubborn. I didn't call out. No one had knocked since Meredith closed the garage door that night. Just before lights out, she'd tossed me a half-used roll of paper towels. In case it leaks, she'd said like we were discussing a grocery bag, and not an incision. The hallway was quiet as I passed the kitchen. There were fresh prints on the counter someone had been baking. Probably the lemon scones Chloe insisted on for her shower. I remembered the exact words. If it's not pastel, it doesn't belong on the table. There were photos lined up by the sink, already printed. Chloe's engagement shoot in sepia tones. No siblings, no family portraits, just her, him, and a dog she adopted last fall, dressed in a pink satin bow. I scanned each frame as I passed. Not one had my face. My shoes made no sound on the floor. I paused by the credenza in the entryway, where the mail tray overflowed with RSVP cards. A few were addressed to the Whitmans, a name I'd never taken even when I could have. Even when I still believed it mattered. The gift sat where I'd left it weeks ago, wrapped in brown craft paper corners, tucked with care. A patchwork quilt, stitched from the old dresses Chloe and I had worn in the summers when we still built forts in the living room. Some pieces were from our mother's apron. One square bore a sun-faded label from a theme park we'd begged to visit 3 birthdays in a row. I ran a hand along the seam where thread met memory. "Is that what you made?" Chloe's voice drifted from the living room behind me. "God, it looks like something from a rummage sale." A second voice. "Meredith, just put it with the extras. Or toss it. No one's going to notice." I didn't turn around. My fingers let go. At the door, I slipped on the jacket I'd left folded by the umbrella stand. The inside lining still smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender detergent. Rachel's house always smelled like that. She once said it helped her sleep. My phone buzzed once. A message from Rachel Keyes under the blue pot. "Couch is made up. No need to knock." No one in the house had texted me since the surgery. Not even Mother. The last message from her had been 2 lines. "Don't overextend your stay." Chloe's schedule is tight. I hadn't replied. Behind me, a drawer slid open. "Mom said she didn't even ask permission," Meredith murmured. A chair scraped gently. "She just assume she can take up space." I stood still in the frame of the door. A small brass bell hung above the knob, one Chloe had made at summer camp. I used to joke it never rang. It did, now. A soft chime. Not loud enough to startle, just enough to punctuate the end of something. Did she hear us? Chloe's voice lowered. A pause. "Does it matter I didn't close the door behind me, just walked down the steps, past the flower bed I once planted with perennials Mother never watered, past the mailbox where 3 years ago I left a card for Father on his retirement, the one he never opened? The sky held no drama, just a dull stillness that mirrored the inside of my chest. The walk to the car was slow, each step measured, not hesitant. The weight in my abdomen reminded me of healing, of limits, of choices made one small movement at a time. I opened the trunk and placed my bag gently inside. It wasn't full. I hadn't brought much. I never did anymore. Learned that the more you carry, the more they make you explain. The rear view mirror caught my reflection, hair unwashed, face dull but even. No smudges, no tear tracks, just a quiet set of features that had stopped waiting for correction. At the end of the block, a child chalked hearts on the sidewalk. She looked up briefly, then back down again, uninterested. I wasn't part of her drawing. Halfway to Rachel's, I pulled over near the park where Chloe once broke her arm, jumping off the swings. I remembered how I held her wrist on the way to the ER. Meredith sat up front, flipping through a bridal magazine. We were 12, 14, 16. The bench near the sandbox was still there. I didn't sit on it, just stood for a moment, watching a mother apply sunscreen to a boy's nose while he squirmed away. I thought of the quilt, of the way Chloe's voice thinned into a sharp line. It looks like something from a rummage sale. I didn't defend the hours I spent sewing. Or the stitches I'd redone in the garage under a single light bulb. The cloth didn't need defense. It was never meant to impress. It was meant to remember. Back in the car, I found Rachel's driveway easily. The blue pot sat where she said it would, tucked beneath the front step. I let myself in, placed my bag by the coat rack, and walked into the quiet. There was a small bowl of grapes on the kitchen table and a folded blanket on the armrest of the couch. Not handmade, not symbolic, just warm. A post-it note on the fridge took Eli to piano. Make yourself tea. Camomile's in the tin. I didn't need the tea. I just held the tin in my hand for a while. Its lid fit snugly a smooth seal. Nothing spilling, nothing escaping. I turned off my phone and placed it screen down on the windowsill. The room didn't ask for conversation. Later, I walked barefoot to the back door. The floor creaked once under the weight of someone who no longer needed permission to step lightly. And I understood something I hadn't been willing to name. It wasn't that they forgot me. It was that they rehearsed life in a way that required my absence. And for the first time, I didn't interrupt. Stillness feels unfamiliar when you've spent years anticipating the next wound. The sheets smelled faintly of eucalyptus. Rachel said it helped with the migraines, but I didn't ask for it. The mattress gave slightly when I shifted, not enough to notice, unless you'd slept nights without softness. I hadn't curled my body for warmth. I hadn't needed to do. There was no knock on the door. No voice asking what my plans were or how long I intended to stay. The curtain by the window moved gently with the wind. The rod creaked once, then went quiet. I didn't draw it shut. The old kettle in the kitchenette let out a sigh before boiling. I poured the water over a slice of ginger and watched it cloud the cup. The tea stained the rim faintly like it had done many mornings in my childhood before anyone else woke up. Back then, I used to make breakfast first, hoping someone would notice. No one came out to comment on the scent this time. No one came to take the mug from my hand or to remind me that Chloe preferred lemon. I sat on the bench by the small window and listened to the wind chimes Rachel had tied with twine outside the eaves. They hit softly, not quite a song, more like memory tapping gently. A blue folder sat on the table. I hadn't opened it in months. Inside were receipts I used to save for taxes. This time, I looked at them differently line by line. 840. Meredith's car repairs. 320. Chloe's engagement deposit. 200. Mom's medication, twice then again. None of it was ever repaid. None of it ever discussed after the moment I handed it over. There was a note in Meredith's handwriting on one of the slips. Transfer now. Don't want to deal with Dad's complaints. No, thank you. Just that. I had wired the money within the hour. I didn't feel the need to confront them. I just saved the PDFs onto a new folder on my laptop, labeled it Closure Unsent. The radio stayed off, the television too. I didn't need background sound. I found enough rhythm in the soft hum of the old refrigerator and the far-off murmur of neighborhood sprinklers turning on and off. I watched the same bird land on the garden fence twice. It carried nothing in its beak either time. Rachel had placed fresh towels in a basket by the closet. On top sat a pale grey shirt I'd left at her place years ago, loose at the collar, soft from use. I washed it that afternoon, not because it was dirty, but because it felt like time to restore something that had only ever belonged to me. I folded my clothes slowly. Each crease was deliberate, not to impress anyone, not to make space for others, just to put my life back in order inch by inch with my own hands. A notification blinked on my phone screen. Group, message, family photo reminder, dress code is cream, no denim. I tapped once, held the message and pressed leave group. No pop-up asked me to confirm. It just vanished, like I'd never been part of the thread. Later, I opened a storage box I'd carried with me from place to place. Inside were letters I once printed out, thinking permanence might come from paper. One note from my father still had a coffee ring in the corner, and the words, "Don't complicate things. Chloe's the one who needs support right now." It wasn't signed. There was a voice inside me that used to argue back. I didn't hear it anymore. What remained was quieter. Not agreement, just absence. I bought ginger and honey at the local market. Not because I needed them urgently, but because the walk felt useful. I passed a small flower stall on the way out. A child held up a dandelion crown to her mother and waited. The woman took it, placed it on her own head, and smiled. The child didn't take a photo. She just watched her mother wear it for a while. I stood there longer than necessary. When I got back, I washed the dish rack. Not because it was mine, because I used it. I dried it with the same towel I'd used on my hands earlier and hung it precisely across the oven handle. The corners aligned. A single envelope arrived in Rachel's mailbox that evening, addressed to me. I hadn't updated anything yet. It found its way here. Return address, Chloe Whitman. Inside was a thank you card, printed with gold script. Your contribution to our day has been noted. Kindly refrain from additional contact during our honeymoon planning. No signature. Just the Whitmans. I slipped it back into the envelope and tucked it under a stack of magazines near the fireplace. No need to tear it. No need to keep it, either. I boiled water again and placed the tea bag directly into the chipped mug Rachel had said I could claim as mine. It had a small crack down the side, sealed years ago with resin. Still held heat. When I carried it to the porch and sat beneath the wind chimes, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't reach for noise. I just watched the horizon dip slightly behind the trees and let the quiet hold without explanation. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be asked back in. And I didn't need to answer to the silence anymore. Absence only matters when someone else notices it. The email came without a subject line, just her name, Meredith Thomas, bold at the top of the inbox like it belonged there. The message began plainly, "We should talk. There are a few forms related to the house that need your input." No greeting, no time zone consideration, no mention of where I'd gone. I closed it without responding, but I didn't delete it. The next morning, a message arrived from Chloe. Not a text, a DM. A filtered selfie of her holding a champagne flute, tagged at a brunch cafe. The caption read, "The family vibe is weird without you. Think about it." "Okay," a second message followed. "It's not about blame. Just want everyone to get along." There was a heart emoji. Pink, not red. I checked the time. It was still early enough that no one should have been thinking about me, unless prompted. Later that day, a number I hadn't saved flashed on my screen. I knew it anyway. I let it ring through the first time. The second I answered. "Your mother isn't well. You know that." There was no pause before the next sentence. "You should be thinking bigger than yourself. Not a question. Not a request. Not even frustration. Just delivery." I sat with the phone in my lap after the call ended. The plastic back of the case had a crack running from corner to corner, just barely held together by a strip of clear tape. It had been there for months. I had never fixed it. I didn't go back to the inbox that evening. I turned on the television instead, something I hadn't done in weeks. Local channel background noise. A headline crawled across the bottom, "Whitman Caldwell wedding draws notable guests." The camera panned across a manicured garden strung with white lights. Chloe stood at the center in a lace gown, holding hands with Jordan, both grinning for the press. The caption listed close family in attendance. Parents, extended cousins, even Meredith and her husband. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even in passing. I let the volume stay low and walked into the kitchenette. A spoon rested inside a chipped mug from the night before, dried tea stains in concentric circles. I rinsed it with cold water and set it upside down to dry. The sound of my phone vibrated once on the counter. A text from Evelyn Grant, our old neighbor. "I was at Helen's funeral yesterday. Surprised not to see you. Thought you'd have known." No period. No exclamation point. Just that. I read the message twice before putting the phone face down. I didn't sit. I didn't cry. I just stood there with the refrigerator humming beside me and the faint scent of dried ginger still clinging to the air. They buried my grandmother without telling me. The woman who taught me how to sew a hem, who used to press leaves between sheets of wax paper and slide them into my notebooks, who once told me being quiet doesn't mean you don't matter. It means you're listening. I had always listened. That was the problem. I didn't check social media that night. I didn't open the family group thread. I just walked to the end of the small guest house and opened the drawer where I'd placed my old notebooks. The one with the fraying spine held a list she once made my grandmother. Words worth using written in her slanted print. I read them one by one. Steadfast, resolve, withstand, grace. None of them were loud. I remembered the quilt she helped me patch, once corner torn from overuse. We had mended it in silence side by side. She said, "Some things don't need replacing, just the strength to hold." I hadn't seen the quilt since moving out. I hadn't seen her in months. There were no photos in the obituary, just a line in the local announcements, "Helen Margaret Whitman beloved, mother and grandmother." No mention of who was notified. No mention of me. On the shelf above the window, a small ceramic bird I'd brought from her house sat beside an old jar of matches. It had a crack in its side, same as always. I didn't move it. I didn't clean the dust gathering beneath its feet. I knew what they were doing. The sudden messages, the quiet calls, the request for my name on a form. It wasn't regret. It wasn't guilt. It was logistics. I didn't belong in their story, but I was still useful in their paperwork. I thought about the voicemail again. You should be thinking bigger than yourself. I had. That's why I left, No one had called when the stitches were still fresh. No one had asked where I went when the garage door shut behind me. But now, in the quiet gaps after celebration in the corners where estate signatures and legal boundaries lived, my name was relevant again. They hadn't reached out to heal. They reached out to tidy. I took the match jar off the shelf and held it for a while. The lid had rusted slightly. One match sat tilted inside, bent just enough to lean. I didn't strike it. Some things I've learned don't need flame. Some absences are not meant to be filled. Some names once left out of the goodbye don't need to return for the ending. Not everything repaired needs to return to its original shape. The paint on the front wall flaked off in long curled strips, revealing an older shade beneath paler, almost undecided. I never tried to repaint it. The light hit that side of the apartment in the early hours, and somehow it felt less like neglect, more like memory. The place was small. Just enough space for a bed, a folding table, and a second-hand chair with one uneven leg. But the floorboards creaked in a language I understood, and no one knocked unless invited. At the farmer's market 2 blocks away, I bought a small pot of lemon thyme from a woman with dirt under her nails and a woven bracelet on her wrist. She didn't ask if it was a gift. She didn't ask anything. I watered it each morning with a chipped teacup, the kind with no handle and a gold rim rubbed smooth by time. The library called back after only 2 days, just a part-time shelving role, no desk, no title, but the scent of old pages, the hush between shelves, and the way people whispered like they were walking through memory that was more than enough. I learned how to reshelve in silence, how to keep the labels straight, how to listen without interrupting even my own thoughts. In the evenings, I boiled water on the stove and let the steam carry through the cracked window. I folded my clothes neatly, sleeves tucked inside socks, pressed into pairs, not because anyone might inspect them, but because I liked the order. There was something restful in finishing small things entirely. In one of the boxes I hadn't unpacked, I found the envelope marked Nantucket. Inside were a dozen letters, some typed, most handwritten. My grandmother's cursive sloped slightly to the right, like it was always reaching toward something. One line stopped me. If someone forgets you are here, remind them by how you live, not by what you say. I pinned that page beside the refrigerator, between a shopping list and a bent paperclip. The voicemail came on a Thursday. I was wrong. I didn't know how to stop it. Pause. That's not an excuse. Just, that's what it was. No apology, just a worn-down edge of something almost human. I saved the message, not for closure. Just to remember the sound of a sentence that didn't expect a reply. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. At the post office, I picked up a padded envelope addressed only to my first name. Inside was a scarf, navy blue wool with a loose thread near the edge. No note, no sender. But I recognized the knit. It matched one I'd seen on my mother's chair for years. I didn't wear it. I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beneath my winter coat. There was no anger in the gesture, just separation. At the library, a young boy tugged at my sleeve once and held up a book with both hands. His mother watched from the reading corner but didn't move. Do you think this is real? The book was about stars. I think so, I answered. He nodded like I had given him permission. Later that night, I made tea with sugar. The lemon thyme leaves curled gently when touched by heat. I watched the steam rise and imagined my grandmother's kitchen, her hands never idle, her silence always full. A letter came from Meredith. Legal stationery. Typed. We are reviewing shared obligations. Please advise if you intend to maintain interest in the property. No greeting, no closing. I didn't respond to that either. I placed the envelope behind a copy of Leaves of Grass where it stayed untouched. There was no announcement, no social post, no mass text to declare I had started over. I let the quiet do its own work. There were no reunions scheduled, no explanations prepared. The people who needed me gone had done the removing. All that remained was the absence they left behind, and I had decided not to fill it on their behalf. I ironed a blouse for the first time in years, even though no one would see me that day. I cooked enough for one. I bought fresh sheets in pale blue and took the time to press each corner tight. At night, I read the last line of one of her letters. Peace doesn't make a sound. That's why it's hard to hear when it's finally yours. Some days I heard nothing, but I listened anyway. And on the shelf by the window beside the potted thyme and the old mug, I left one paper crane I had folded from a torn receipt. Just one. I didn't write anything on it. I didn't need to. Some names live longer in silence than they ever did in conversation. I arrived 10 minutes early, not out of urgency, but because I no longer wanted to give them the satisfaction of waiting. The waiting room was painted beige, the kind that tries to look neutral, but settles somewhere between indifference and resignation. I kept my folder balanced on my lap, not clutched, not hidden, just visible. Meredith didn't stand when she saw me. She shifted in her seat, crossed one leg over the other, like she was resuming a paused meeting, not starting a new one. Chloe sat beside her, scrolling without purpose. Their lawyer nodded at me. I nodded back. "Thanks for coming." Meredith began, her voice trimmed of any softness. "We're finalizing the transition of the house, and there's a document that would simplify things." She slid the folder across the table. A signature page peeked out. I opened mine in reply, neatly clipped a notarized copy of Grandma Helen's will, a list of wire transfers from my account to theirs over 8 years, photos of receipts with my handwriting still on them, yellow sticky tabs marked each one. I hadn't rushed. I had simply been ready. Meredith adjusted her tone. "This waiver just clarifies that you voluntarily forfeit claim to any inherited property, so the estate doesn't get entangled in probate." I read the sentence again. I voluntarily forfeit claim. Not new words, just old words arranged like a trick mirror. I pulled a highlighter from my bag, uncapped it quietly, and drew a single, bold line beneath the last clause on my copy of "The will, all living granddaughters shall receive equal shares of remaining assets." No protest, no flare in my chest, only that line. Bright yellow, undeniable. Meredith tapped her pen. "We assumed you'd prefer to stay out of this." I was never asked. Chloe glanced up, tone brittle. "You're blowing this up for no reason." "No," I replied, folding the will back into its folder. "I'm just not disappearing on schedule." The lawyer cleared his throat, already rearranging papers. I think he knew the conversation had tipped. Meredith shifted again. "This insistence. It's not helping. You're only hurting Mom." I let that hang between us. Not because it pierced, but because it didn't. When she finally said, "You're breaking the family apart," I placed my hands flat on the table and spoke without leaning forward. "I'm not breaking anything. I just stopped pretending. They didn't stand when I left. They didn't call after me. The door clicked shut behind me without resistance. Some things don't slam, they just settle." Back at my apartment, I opened the state website and found the form. Name change petition. I filled it in with steady hands. No second thoughts. No list of pros and cons. Just one line that felt earned. Requested legal name, Samantha Whitlow. The cursor blinked beneath it, as if waiting for me to hesitate. I didn't. Whitlow. My grandmother's name, the one she signed at the end of her birthday cards in careful cursive. The name she embroidered into quilt corners, stitched into the inside flap of her Bible, painted on the bottom of every mug she gave as a gift. Ellison had never felt like mine. It clung more than it belonged. Before I hit submit, I remembered the last time I held her hand. The skin had gone translucent then, but her fingers still curled around mine with that same patient steadiness. She didn't tell me what to do. She never had. She just whispered, "Don't let them decide your ending." That memory didn't ache. It just remained. I printed the receipt, folded it once, slid it into the same drawer that held the letter opener she used when opening Christmas cards. Bone handle, silver edge, still faintly smelling of cinnamon from the drawer sachets. Later that night, a voicemail came through. It had been a while since my phone even displayed their number. "I heard you're still dragging this out. Just know this: if you think anyone will side with you, think again. No one's buying your martyr routine." It was Meredith. Always Meredith. I didn't save it, but I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there, suspended, not worthy of action. Rachel knocked once before letting herself in. She handed me a mug of warm milk with chamomile. No words, just the mug. I held it with both hands and glanced at the corner of the room where my grandmother's shawl now hung. It was worn thin in the middle, the threads puckered, but the border held. Always the border. Rachel finally spoke. "You don't owe anyone what they threw away." I nodded, not because I needed agreement, but because it helped something land. I thought about that kitchen drawer back at my mother's house, the one where I used to slide cash into unmarked envelopes, the one no one thanked me for, but always noticed if it was empty. I wondered if it was still there, or if someone else filled it now. That night, I laid the folder flat on the table, took out the photos of the receipts, the hospital invoice I had covered, without being asked the check I'd written for Chloe's wedding deposit that never made it into any toast or thank you note. I clipped everything together, sealed it in a new envelope, and wrote 3 words across the front, "For the record." I didn't mail it. I didn't shred it either. I placed it in a locked box under my bed. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about not needing to. The next morning, I filled out the final affidavit, then walked it 3 blocks to the notary. The woman behind the glass wore a sweater with tiny cardinals embroidered at the collar. She glanced at the name, looked up, and offered a quiet congratulations. No one had ever congratulated me for leaving. When I returned home, I placed the notarized paper beside a folded note that read, "In case they ever ask, show them this." Not a warning. Not a threat. Just evidence that I had stayed alive inside the silence. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the mug chipped along the rim where I had dropped it months ago. I hadn't replaced it. It still worked. It still held warmth. Outside, the wind picked up. A few leaves scattered across the porch. The bell above my neighbor's door rang once, then stopped. I didn't stand. I didn't move. Some lines are drawn not to divide, but to define. And this one had held. Some things feel more permanent when no one's looking. The mint plant had sprouted 2 new leaves overnight, both a shade lighter than the others, delicate and certain. I hadn't done anything extraordinary to make that happen, just water, light, and showing up. Still, There it was. The kettle clicked once as it cooled. I poured the tea slowly into the ceramic mug Rachel had handed me my first evening here. The rim had a hair-line chip near the lip, barely noticeable unless you ran your thumb over it. I never tried to replace it. I just turned the cup slightly when I drank. Steam curled upward, brushing my face, then dissolving. I placed the mug beside the bundle of letters, handwritten, all addressed to myself in months past. Folded pages on worn stationery, some stained by the corner of a coffee spoon, others smudged where I'd held them too long. I had written them when the noise inside my head was too loud to carry. Today I wasn't reading them. I was sorting. 3 to keep. The rest would be wrapped in plain twine and tucked away, not discarded, just not needed anymore. From the hallway, the sound of a child laughing slipped under my door. A short, bright burst, followed by the familiar melody of a children's song playing through thin walls. The mother's voice followed, gentle but rushed, calling for shoes or a sweater, I couldn't tell which. Their life continued beside mine, not over it. At the mailbox I found no bills, no legal letters, no reminders, just a single card with cartoon books on the cover and block letters. Welcome new neighbour, from all of us at Hillcrest Library. No signature, no need for one. I left it on the counter beside the fruit bowl between a wrinkled pear and a stack of grocery receipts folded into halves and then fourths. The bowl wasn't meant to be decorative. It just held what I remembered to pick up on Thursdays. The photo frame came next, carefully removed from the shelf. The glass had dulled a little, not from time, but from dust and disuse. I wiped it with a cloth I kept under the sink. Lavender threads peeked out from the edge of the photo, where my grandmother's scarf had billowed in the wind the day we took it. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. In the picture, 2 fingers extended like she'd just finished brushing something off without making a fuss. The frame stood again where it belonged, angled slightly toward the light, but not too much. On the kitchen table, my name sat quietly in black ink, Samantha Whitlow at the top of a printed certificate. No stamp, no gold leaf, no celebration. Just paper. Just proof. I didn't frame it. I didn't hang it. I folded it into thirds and placed it under the basket of clean tea towels. No one had asked why. No one had noticed the shift. And still, everything was different. Once I might have posted it captioned, "It handed it to someone like a shield." Now it was only for me. It didn't need an audience to be true. The voice came back to me, not imagined, not summoned. Just there. There are things you don't need to defend out loud, as long as you've survived them. That was hers. I remembered the way she stirred sugar into her tea without looking, never missing a beat. The way she folded notes into cookbooks. The way she used her name like a map she had drawn herself. I stepped out onto the balcony, the chipped mug still warm in my hand. The chair creaked as I sat. A notebook lay closed on the table beside me, a pen resting across the top like a bridge between thoughts. I didn't open it. Not everything needed to be documented. Not everything had to become story. The rooftops across the way caught the morning light, pale and gentle. Somewhere a bird tapped twice against a railing. Someone below sneezed, and a door creaked closed in response. All of it real. All of it mine by proximity, not possession. I looked down at my hands. The skin had healed in places I hadn't noticed before. I moved one finger along the mug's handle, tracing the curve like it might lead somewhere new. No one had apologized. No reconciliation dinner had been planned. No inbox messages blinking with overdue redemption. And yet, there was tea. There was light. There was space. The quiet no longer asked for answers. It simply stayed. I thought about the envelopes I used to seal with breath held tight, the conversations I rehearsed and never had, the version of myself that bent each time someone labeled me difficult or ungrateful, as if silence were gratitude and boundaries were betrayal. None of those versions lived here anymore. I didn't write. I didn't post. I didn't respond. I watched the steam rise, felt the chair beneath me, and let the warmth from the cup settle against my palm like a small, steady truth. I had nothing left to prove, only a life left to live. On purpose, in full, without needing permission.